Dr. Alistair Finch believed that the past was a fragile, sacred thing. As the director of the Metropolitan Antiquities Museum, he was its high priest, its fiercest guardian. His world was one of climate-controlled silence, of artifacts cataloged to the last decimal point, of history held safely behind layers of armored glass. At 45, he was the most respected and feared curator in his field, a man whose academic brilliance was matched only by his cold, obsessive perfectionism. He was a man haunted by a ghost. 10 years ago, the Star of Babylon, a priceless Sumerian sapphire, had been stolen from a collection under his care. The official report cited a security lapse, an oversight. It was a single devastating crack in his otherwise flawless career, and had spent the subsequent decade ensuring no such crack would ever appear again. He had built his reputation into an impenetrable fortress. Now, he was staking that reputation on his magnum opus, the restoration of the Lament of Antioch, a Roman glass vase from the 2nd century. It had been shattered during an earthquake 1,000 years ago, its fragments discovered in a Syrian tomb. The museum had every shard, but for 50 years, no one had been able to piece it back together. The glass had a unique, iridescent quality, a milky blue that shifted a fiery opal in the light, a technique lost to time. Modern adhesives were too harsh, modern glass too lifeless. The vase, even in pieces, was the heart of the museum's upcoming Chronos exhibition. To restore would be to redeem his past failure. It would be his ultimate act of preservation. The problem was, it was impossible. He stood in the sterile, white light of the conservation lab, looking at the tray of luminous blue shards. The world's top conservators had all shaken their heads. The chemical composition is unique, Alistair. His lead technician had told him that morning. We can't replicate it. To try and fail would be to destroy it forever. Alistair refused to accept defeat. He retreated to the museum's archives, a silent, dusty kingdom where he felt most at home. He spent weeks poring over ancient texts, searching for a clue, and then he found it, a footnote in a forgotten 18th century manuscript, mentioning that the secrets of the Antioch Glassmakers were not lost, but had been passed down through a single, unbroken family line of artisans, the de Lumières. The last of them, the note suggested, were glass blowers who had settled in America. His research team worked for days, tracing the lineage. They found the end of the line, not in a prestigious university or a famous art studio, but in a small, struggling glass-blowing workshop in the city's old industrial district. The shop was run by the last living descendant of the de Lumière family. Her name was Cora. Cora's studio was not a place of quiet preservation. It was a place of violent, beautiful creation. It was a cavernous, dusty warehouse that smelled of fire, sweat, and molten sand. The roar of the furnace was a constant, living heartbeat. Shards of colored glass glittered on the floor like fallen jewels. Finished pieces, vases, bowls, strange luminous sculptures, sat cooling on shelves, each one unique, imperfect, and breathtakingly alive. Cora stood before the furnace, the glory hole, A demigod in a world of fire. At 32, she moved with a fluid, powerful grace. Her hair was a wild tangle of dark curls, held back by a leather band. Her arms, bare and strong, were slick with sweat, the muscles defined from years of wrestling with heat and gravity. She was not curating the past. She was forging a new one, taking broken things, sand, discarded bottles, the shard of her own life, and transforming them with her breath and her hands. Alistair Finch, in his immaculate tweed jacket and polished leather shoes, looked like a man from another planet when he stepped into her studio. He had to raise his voice to be heard over the roar of the furnace. "Ms. de Lumiere," he shouted. Cora turned from the fire, a glowing orb of molten glass at the end of her blowpipe. She looked at him, her eyes the color of sea glass, taking in his stiff posture and expensive clothes with a flicker of amusement. "No one's called me that in years," she said, her voice husky. "It's just Cora. I am Dr. Alistair Finch from the Metropolitan Antiquities Museum," he announced, as if the title were a passport that granted him access to any world. "I am here to discuss a matter of great historical importance." He explained his purpose, his words precise and academic. He spoke of the lament of Antioch, of the lost technique, of her family's legacy. He finished by making his offer. "The museum is prepared to offer you a substantial grant, Ms. de Lumiere, in exchange for your family's journals, any technical notes that might pertain to the Antioch glass." Cora took the molten glass to her workbench and began to shape it, her movements a mesmerizing dance. She didn't look at him. "My family's journals are not for sale, Dr. Finch," she said simply. "I assure you, the grant would be more than generous," he pressed, unaccustomed to being refused. She laughed, then a low, smoky sound. "You think this is about money?" She gestured to the fiery, chaotic studio around them. "People like you see the past as a collection of artifacts to be owned, cataloged, and put behind glass. You're a collector of beautiful dead things." She finally turned to look at him, her gaze direct and challenging. "My family's legacy isn't in a dusty journal. It's in my hands. It's in the breath I put into fire. It's alive, and it's not for sale." Alistair was stunned. "But this is for the public good, for the preservation of history." "Preserving a thing is not the same as understanding it," she countered. "You want to understand the Antioch glass? You don't read about it in a book. You feel its memory. You learn its language." He was about to argue, to leave, to dismiss her as an arrogant eccentric. But he was also a desperate man. "Then teach me," he heard himself say. Cora looked at him for a long, appraising moment. She saw the desperation behind his pride, the ghost of a failure in his eyes. "Fine," she said, a slow, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "I will help you restore your vase, but not on your terms. On mine." "What are your terms?" he asked, his voice tight. "The restoration does not happen in your sterile lab. It happens here in my studio, with my tools. And you," she said, pointing at him with the end of her blowpipe, "will be my apprentice. You will sweep the floors. You will learn to handle the fire. You will put your own hands on the glass. You will learn what it means to create something not just preserve it. She raised an eyebrow. You want to understand the past, Dr. Finch? Then you're going to have to get your hands dirty in the present. That's my price. Alistair's first day as an apprentice was a study in humiliation. Cora handed him a heavy, coarse broom and pointed to a corner of the studio floor littered with sharp, glittering shards of broken glass. "Start there," she said, and turned back to her furnace without another word. He, Dr. Alistair Finch, a man who advised international committees on cultural heritage, swept the floor. His tweed jacket was replaced by a borrowed fire-retardant canvas apron that smelled of smoke. His pristine hands, accustomed to the delicate touch of ancient parchment, grew red and raw from the work. The studio was a world of brutal physical reality. The heat from the furnace was a constant, oppressive wave. The work was heavy, dangerous, and unforgiving. He watched Cora, mesmerized by her skill. She moved with a dancer's grace and blacksmith's strength, her body a perfect conduit between her creative vision and the molten, temperamental glass. He, on the other hand, was clumsy, inept, a liability. He nearly dropped a tray of cooling tools. He flinched every time she opened the furnace door. He felt like a fool. "You're thinking too much," she told him one afternoon, as he struggled to gather a small amount of molten glass on the end of a punny rod. "You're trying to analyze it. Glass doesn't respond to analysis. It responds to instinct, to breath." He was used to a world of quiet contemplation, of meticulous research. This was a world of instinct, of split-second decisions, of a deep, physical conversation with a dangerous, beautiful material. He was completely out of his depth. He started arriving early, before she did, just to sit in the quiet studio as the sun rose, trying to understand the space. He read her family's journals, which she finally allowed him to see. They were not technical manuals. They were filled with sketches, with poems about light, with philosophical musings on the nature of fire and sand. Glass as a memory. Her great-grandfather had written, "It remembers the fire that gave it life, and the hands that gave it form. To mend it, you must first listen to its story." He began to see. This wasn't just a craft. It was a philosophy. The slow burn of their relationship began over shared, simple lunches eaten on overturned buckets amidst the studio's chaos. He would bring her coffee from a nearby cafe. She would share the simple, hearty bread and cheese she brought for her own meal. "Why did you stay?" he asked her one day. "With a name like de Lumiere, you could have been world famous. You could have your own gallery in Paris." She shrugged, breaking off a piece of bread. "I tried that world. It was all about branding, about creating a signature style and repeating it. It was about making beautiful, expensive objects for rich people's shelves." She looked around her dusty, imperfect studio. "I didn't want to make objects. I wanted to make vessels, things that could hold something. Light, water, a story." She looked at him. "What about you? Why the museum? Why the obsession with things that are already gone?" He thought for a long moment. "Because I believe," he said, his voice quiet, "that if we forget our stories, we lose ourselves. I'm not just preserving objects. I'm preserving memories. proof that we were here, that we loved and fought and created beautiful things. She nodded slowly, a new respect in her eyes. So, she said, we're in the same business after all. We're both just trying to keep the light from going out. In that moment, a fragile bridge was built between them, a shared understanding that spanned the chasm between their two worlds. He was the curator of memory. She was the keeper of the flame. The restoration of the lament of Antioch began. It was a process of almost impossible delicacy. They worked together, their two worlds slowly merging. Alistair, with his historian's knowledge, could identify the context of each shard, where it belonged in the vase's narrative frieze. Cora, with her artist's intuition, knew how to read the glass itself, how its internal stresses dictated the way it could be joined. This piece, she said one afternoon, holding a small, curved shard of the light, was under immense pressure. See the way the light refracts here? It wants to be joined from this angle, not that one. It's telling us how it broke. Alistair watched, fascinated. He was used to imposing order on the past. She was listening to it, allowing it to guide her hands. While working, he delved deeper into her family's journals, not just for the technical secrets of the glass, but for the stories. He learned about her ancestors, a long line of stubborn, brilliant artisans, and in a journal from the early 20th century, written by her grandfather, he found something that made his blood run cold. Her grandfather wrote of a rival, a wealthy American industrialist named Silas Blackwood, a ruthless collector who had tried to steal his formulas. He described Blackwood as a man with a collector's greed and a thief's morals. The name hit Alistair like a physical blow. Silas Blackwood was the same man who had been the primary suspect in the theft of the Star of Babylon 10 years ago. The case had gone cold, the evidence circumstantial, but Alistair had never forgotten the name. He cross-referenced the dates. Blackwood had been in Europe around the same time. He was trying to acquire the de Lumiere formulas. The connection was tenuous, but it was there. He showed the journal to Cora. This man, Blackwood, he said, his voice tense. Do you know if your grandfather had any other dealings with him? Cora's face darkened. He was a plague on my family for years, she said. He believed that beauty was something to be owned, to be locked away. He tried to buy my grandfather's entire workshop. When he refused, strange things started happening. Fires, thefts, nothing ever proven. But the shadow of that man, it was long. Alistair felt a surge of adrenaline, the old instinct of the historical detective kicking in. The ghost of his own past failure was suddenly, unexpectedly, connected to the work in his hands. This wasn't just about restoring a vase anymore. This was about solving a cold case. This was about redemption. Cora, he said, his voice low and urgent, I think the man who haunted your family is the same man who destroyed my career. The atmosphere in the studio shifted. The quiet, focused work of the restoration was now overlaid with a new, palpable tension. The ghost of Silas Blackwood, a man neither of them had ever met. was now a third presence in the room, a shadow cast from the past. Alistair, with Cora's permission, took the journals back to the museum at night, scanning the pages, searching for any other clue that might connect Blackwood to the star Babylon. He found references to Blackwood's obsession with Mesopotamian artifacts, his known associates in the black market for antiquities. It was a web of shadows and whispers. Their work on the vase became more than a collaboration. It became an alliance. They were no longer just a curator and an artist. They were two detectives piecing together a puzzle that spanned a century. One evening, as they were preparing a small shard for bonding, a sleek, Blacktown car pulled up outside the studio. A man in an expensive suit, his face a mask of polite menace, stepped out. He was Blackwood's lawyer. Ms. de Lumiere, the lawyer said, his voice smooth as polished stone. Mr. Blackwood is aware of your current project. He has a deep appreciation for the lament of Antioch. He is prepared to make a very generous offer to acquire the piece once it is restored. He would also be willing to fund your studio for the next decade in exchange for exclusive access to your family's techniques. The vase is a property of the museum, and it is not for sale, Alistair said, stepping forward, his voice cold. The lawyer's gaze flicked to Alistair, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Ah, Dr. Finch, I remember you from the Babylon incident, a tragic loss. It would be a shame if another such incident were to befall this piece. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Get out, Cora said, her voice low and dangerous. The lawyer just smiled, placed a business card on a dusty workbench, and left. The air in the studio was thick with a new kind of fear. Blackwood wasn't just a ghost from the past anymore. He was here. He was watching. He won't stop, Cora said, her face pale. Men like that don't. They believe everything has a price. Then we have to work faster, Alistair said, a new, fierce determination in his eyes. And we have to be smarter. That night, he installed a new state-of-the-art security system in her studio. A quiet network of sensors and cameras that fed directly to his own phone. He wasn't just protecting an artifact anymore. He was protecting her. The next day, there was a setback. A crucial shard, one that formed the lip of the vase, cracked during the heating process. It was a tiny fracture, but in the world of glass, it was a disaster. Alistair's heart sank. He saw his own failure reflected in the broken piece. It's over, he said, his voice hollow. But Cora didn't see failure. She looked at the cracked shard, a thoughtful expression on her face. No, she said slowly. It's not over. It's just changed the story. She looked at him. In Japan, when a piece of pottery breaks, they sometimes mend it with gold. It's called kintsugi. The idea is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. The scars are part of its history, something to be honored, not hidden. She held up the cracked shard. We can't restore it to its original state, but maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe our job is to honor the break. Her words were a revelation to Alistair. He had spent his life trying to hide the cracks in his career, in himself. She was suggesting he illuminate them. "How?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but we'll find a way. Together." And in that moment, facing a shared failure, he felt a bond with her that was stronger than any he had ever known. She wasn't just mending a vase. She was mending him. They worked with new, feverish intensity, driven by the ticking clock of the exhibition and the looming shadow of Silas Blackwood. The idea of kintsugi, of honoring the break, had ignited something in Cora. She began experimenting with a new technique, a way to fuse the glass with a fine, golden filament that would not hide the cracks, but turn them into beautiful, luminous veins. It was a radical, brilliant idea. Alistair, meanwhile, was closing in on his own quarry. He had found a crucial piece of evidence in Cora's grandfather's journal, a sketch of a unique, custom-made display case that Blackwood had commissioned, with a hidden compartment in its base. The sketch was dated just 2 weeks before the Star of Babylon was stolen. He sent the sketch to an old contact at Interpol. The night they were set to complete the final stage of the restoration, the fusion of the golden filaments, it happened. Alistair was at the museum, cross-referencing the display case sketch, when his phone buzzed. It was a silent alarm from Cora's studio. He watched the live feed on his phone. 2 figures, dressed in black, were trying to pry open the back door of the studio. He called, "Cora, they're here," he said, his voice tight. "Get out, now." "No," she said, her voice calm and steady over the roar of the furnace. "The vase is at its most vulnerable stage. If I leave now, it will shatter. I'm not running, Alistair." "Cora, don't be a hero." "I'm not," she interrupted. "I'm a glassblower, and this is my fire." She then said something that made his blood run cold. "Besides, I think I know how to welcome them." And she hung up. He raced to his car, his heart pounding, dialing 911 as he ran. Back at the studio, Cora moved with a deliberate, terrifying calm. She knew her space, its dangers, its secrets. The 2 intruders finally broke through the back door and stepped into the darkened studio, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They saw the vase shimmering on its cooling rack. As they moved towards it, Cora, hidden in the shadows by the furnace, pulled a heavy iron lever. With a roar, a jet of superheated air and steam erupted from a network of vents in the floor she used for flash cooling her pieces. The studio was instantly filled with a thick, scalding fog. The intruders cried out, disoriented. She then pulled another lever. A series of heavy, counterweighted steel shelves, usually used for storing raw glass, swung down from the ceiling, creating a maze, trapping them. It was a brilliant, improvised trap, using the very tools of her creation as weapons of defense. The men panicked, began to smash things, searching for a way out. One of them hurled a heavy tool at the main furnace control panel. There was a shower of sparks, and then a deep, ominous groan. The main gas valve had been damaged. It was now leaking, the hissing sound barely audible under the roar of the steam. Just as Alistair burst through the front door, the first police car screeching to a halt outside, he smelled it. The gas. The whole studio was a ticking time bomb. He saw Cora, silhouetted against the glow of the furnace, try to reach the emergency shut-off valve. But one of the trapped men, seeing his chance, lunged for the vase. "Cora, the vase!" Alistair shouted. "Leave it!" But she didn't listen. She grabbed the hot, fragile vase in her heavily gloved hands, cradling it like a child, and turned to face the intruder. In that moment, the entire studio was a standoff between creation, preservation, and destruction. It was their entire story, condensed into one fiery, desperate moment. The standoff lasted only a second. The intruder lunged, but Alistair was there, tackling him. The two of them crashing to the floor amidst the glittering shards of broken glass. The second man, seeing the flashing police lights outside, made a run for it. Cora, clutching the vase, made it to the main gas shutoff and wrenched it closed, the hissing finally dying. The aftermath was a scene of beautiful chaos. The police had the intruder in custody. The fire department was securing the building. And in the center of it all, Alistair and Cora stood, covered in dust and sweat, adrenaline slowly giving way to a profound, shared exhaustion. Cora gently placed a vase on a cleared workbench. It was intact. The golden filaments seemed to glow with an inner light. It was no longer the lament of Antioch. It was something new, the Phoenix of Antioch. Alistair looked at her, at the fierce, protective love in her eyes. "You would have risked your life for it," he said, his voice full of awe. "It's not just a thing," she replied, her hand resting on the warm glass. "It's a story, and some stories are worth fighting for." The next morning, the news broke. Interpol, acting on Alistair's information about the display case, had raided one of Silas Blackwood's warehouses, and there, hidden in the secret compartment of the custom-made case, was the Star Babylon. The ghost that had haunted Alistair for a decade was finally laid to rest. The intruder from the studio confessed, implicating Blackwood in the attempted theft. Blackwood's empire of stolen beauty came crashing down. The grand opening of the Chronos exhibition was the cultural event of the year. The museum was packed with patrons, journalists, and academics. In the center of the main hall, on a single, dramatically lit pedestal, stood the vase. It was more beautiful than anyone had imagined. The original milky blue glass, interwoven with the new luminous veins of gold, told a story not of perfection, but of resilience, of a thing that had been shattered and had come back stronger, more beautiful for its scars. Alistair stood at the podium to give his speech. The crowd was silent, expectant. "For most of my career," he began, his voice clear and steady, "I believed that my job was to protect the past from the present, to keep it safe, silent, and unchanged. I was wrong." He looked out into the crowd, his eyes finding Cora, who was standing quietly in the back. "The past is not a dead thing to be guarded," he continued. "It is a living thing that is in a constant conversation with the present. This vase is not just a relic of the Roman Empire. It is a product of a dialogue between ancient masters and a modern one. It is a testament to the fact that our history is not defined by our breaks, but by how we choose to mend them. He raised his glass. I would like to dedicate this exhibition not just to the preservation of history, but to its creation, and to the brilliant artists who taught me that the most beautiful things are not the ones that are flawless, but the ones that have the courage to show their light through the cracks. To Cora de Lumiere, the applause was thunderous. Later, after the crowds had thinned, they stood together before the vase. "The Phoenix of Antioch," Cora said softly, reading the new name on the plaque. "I like it. It's the right name," Alistair said. He turned to her. "You know, they've offered me a new position. Head of acquisitions. More money, more prestige. Are you going to take it?" she asked. "No," he said. "I've spent enough time collecting dead things. I've decided I'd rather spend my time with a living flame." He reached out and took her hand. "They want me to write a book about the restoration. I told them I would, but only if I have a co-author." She smiled, her sea glass eyes full of a warm, bright light. "I don't know much about writing books." "That's fine," he said, his fingers lacing through hers. "You know about telling stories. And I think ours is just beginning." They stood there for a long time, their hands joined, their reflections shimmering in the ancient, resilient glass. They were two different worlds, one of quiet history and one of fiery creation, that had finally found their perfect, beautiful, and unbreakable bond. If this story about the beauty of imperfection and the healing power of creation spoke to you, we would be so grateful to hear from you. Where in the world are you today? Every story has a home, and we'd love for you to share yours in the comments. We read each and every one, and they truly mean the world to us. Your stories remind us why we do this. What does it mean to you to be more beautiful for having been broken? We'd love to read your stories and your thoughts on this powerful idea. Liking, sharing, and subscribing is the breath that keeps the fire of these stories alive. Each interaction helps our community grow and allows us to continue creating content that celebrates the quiet, resilient strength of the human heart. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new creation. We have many more stories waiting to be told. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing the power of mending, both in art and in the soul. Until next time, may you honor the beautiful story of your own scars.